Hey, what's up you guys, it's Connor, and today I'm going to be doing a book review for City of Bones by Martha Wells. If you guys don't know, Martha Wells is the author of a very popular series of science fiction novellas that follow a character named Murderbot. I think the first one is called All Systems Red. She also published a series that I absolutely love called the Books of Raxura series. So this is actually my fifth Martha Wells novel, and I've read two collections of short stories about the Books of Raxura as well as the first book in her Murderbot series. But today we're going to be talking about City of Bones, which is a science fiction standalone novel set in a post-apocalyptic fantasy world. In this world, the ancients set up the world so that people could survive this apocalyptic event that started occurring a long time ago. The world went from a very nice, hospitable, livable place to a huge, vast desert that people are struggling to survive in. Most people have collected into these different cities. The main city that we follow in this is called Karasat, and Karasat is structured so that there are different tiers, and the higher up in the city that you are and that you're allowed to go to means that you are higher up in society. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio there. So obviously, because they're surrounded by a desert, there's not a whole lot of water that is accessible to the people living in Karasat. So the main struggle of day-to-day life is remaining at your tier and not falling below where you are, and being able to pay for water so that you can continue to live. The city is ruled by what is called an elector, and they're basically like a king. They rule everything that's going on in the city, and their police force is called the warders. The interesting thing about the police force is that they play with some pretty dangerous magics. The magic system of this world is one where the more that you use the magic, the more likely you are to go insane and to crack and to turn into a crazy person. So there are warders who have used too much magic, have overextended themselves, and then have suffered the consequences and are now viewed as completely mad and insane. The magic is a very natural feeling magic. It's not one that's very concrete and set in stone. So there are people that will do bone magic and burn bones and see the future and stuff like that, sensing other people's locations and trying to read each other's thoughts and stuff like that. So that's the magic system. The ancients also genetically engineered a species of humans that are called the Chrismen. And the main character that you follow in this book is a Chrismen. And Chrismen are able to survive with less amounts of water and are able to survive being poisoned by all of these magical creatures that live in this desert. The Chrismen are also different because the people have like a marsupial pouch, which is where they raise their babies and everything like that. And the Chrismen are also a lot less genetically secure, so they have to be very careful about breeding and making sure that their progeny are healthy and are able to continue and go into the future. So the main character that you follow is a guy named Cat. He is a male of the Chrismen species, and you follow him and his partner Sagai, who is a dark-skinned outsider that comes to this city, and the two of them team up and they basically find different artifacts and sell them on this black market type of trading system. And then you also follow one of the warders. It's a young woman named Ellen, and when she was younger, people thought that she was going to be absolutely amazing, thought that she was going to have a lot of power, but over time Ellen has not lived up to those expectations and now is viewed as kind of like a failure in the warders' social structure. One last thing before we get started with my pros and cons is that the ancients built these things called remnants, and they're basically these big towers that no one lives at, that are out in the desert, and no one really knows what's going on with them. So that's the premise of this book. That was a really long ramble for a standalone novel, but I wanted to talk about it because my first pro for this book is that I loved the world building. It was so solidly done. I could definitely picture all of these different places, especially because Karasat is on the cover. I could really feel how it was to live in this environment and to live in poverty in Karasat, because the main characters, Sagai and Kat, are not the most prosperous people ever. They are stuck at a certain level because of the color of their skin, or because of their species, or because people are just standing in their way because they don't like them. So I could really feel how it was to live in this world on a day-to-day basis. Martha Wells does a really good job of putting realistic people in these situations that react to these situations believably. You see the kids of this world running around and having to try to survive and help their parents supply water and food for them. You see the different people going around the different markets and slyly trying to make a few bucks here or there. You can feel how dangerous it is to leave one of these cities and to go to a different city, or to just travel through the desert. So I just really loved the world building. I really loved the magic. The magic isn't as explained as some other novels that I really love the magic systems for, but I really enjoyed this one because I think that blood magic and bone magic are very interesting, and I always like hearing about them because it's just crazy. I think it is in a country in Africa or within certain tribes of Africa. When albino people are born to those tribes, they're viewed as like magical beings, and if you somehow get a hold of their blood or their hair or something like that, or their bones, they're thought to be good luck talismans and stuff like that. So albino people are very unsafe and it's scary. I'll link an article that I think I read about this a while back, but it was a woman who had been attacked and her arm had been cut off because these people wanted her flesh so that they could have magical powers and be protected and stuff like that. So the Christmen in this world kind of reflected that of our real world. So with that, another pro was the different dynamics between the different groups of people of this world. You have the Elector, who's high up in this tier system, and you have the people in the first 3 tiers that don't really understand what it's like to live in the lower tiers of the society, or even the middle tiers of the society. You have the people of the middle tiers that are throwing down on the people that are at the bottom tiers because they're trying to make themselves feel better and they're trying to work their way up in the tier system. You have the academics that are snooty and have their own things going on and they want to have more power than they actually do. You have the warders, who are these corrupt policemen of this world that can get away with whatever they want. You have the Christmen, who have kind of excommunicated themselves from the human population because the humans are not treating them very well and are trying to get their bones for bone magic. So I think that all the dynamics between the different groups of people were really well done and really interesting to read about. It just kept me very engaged in turning the page. I love that Kat and Sagai were these like treasure hunters. They're like archaeologists who turn treasure hunter because they can't make any money as archaeologists because the academy won't let them in. And seeing the different characters in this world was very compelling for me. I liked following Kat. I thought that he was a really interesting character to have as the main character. He's definitely flawed. He's got some anger issues at the beginning of the book that kind of were like, whoa, what's going on here? And so he has a big chip on his shoulder and he takes it out on the people that are closest to him. And all of the characters have their own flaws, and I really enjoyed reading about all of the different characters. They were all really well done. You couldn't really predict which ones were evil or which ones were good because they all have their own motivations and they all have their own things going on in the background. Another thing with the characters was that they were just funny. I love dry senses of humor in books. Sometimes dry senses of humor in real life can be hard to, pick up on, but the dry senses of humor in the book were really well done. I thought they were hilarious, and so the characters sometimes would make me actually laugh out loud. Another thing I really liked were these different engines, these different remnants, and how the artifacts relate to the remnants, what the remnants are for, and how to get them to start working, because now is the time kind of thing. The plot was just very interesting. And I actually really loved the ending of this novel. It didn't really end how I expected it to end, which was nice for me. I thought that the ending was actually very realistic, which sometimes in standalones it can kind of be too tidy and too wrapped up and too perfect, and I think that this one did a good job of reflecting the environment that they live in and the things that they've been through. So the ending was just very good in my opinion. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of cons. My first con for this is that Kat does have that anger problem. I do appreciate that he is a little bit more sarcastic, a little bit more angry than the rest of the characters because he is of a different species that's been discriminated against throughout the history of this world. But at the beginning of the book, his anger outbursts are a lot more extreme than they are at any other time in the book, which I guess kind of reflects him kind of chilling out a little bit. But at the very beginning of the book, he calls one of the other characters a bitch, and I was just like, whoa, that's like really sudden because there's not a whole lot of cursing that goes on in this book. So for him to just randomly throw that out there and get really upset for not really that big of a reason was kind of jarring. So I didn't really like that whole outburst scene. I think that it could have been toned down just a little bit and would have made more sense with how his character was. And my only other con was that the climax scene where everything is going crazy and everyone's fighting and trying to figure out what's going on and saving themselves and everything like that was kind of confusing. I actually had to reread parts of it because I don't want to go into spoilers. Because the setting of that climactic scene is very complicated, and so I didn't really understand how everything looked, and that part I was having a hard time picturing, where characters were in space and how they were interacting with each other, and just not space like space, but like physical space. So I just got very confused about that and ended up rereading it one time just so I could see if I could make more sense of it, and I did understand it a little bit better when I reread it, but it is still a little bit confusing. At the end of that scene, you understand where everyone is in relation to everyone else. So it was fine, but it is a little confusing. And the last thing that I'll say about this before I give you my rating and be done is that I just really enjoyed this. I had such a good time. I think that this world is one where she could go back to it if she ever wanted to in the future. I'm not sure if she ever will, because this is an older novel. It came out in 1995. So it is a bit of an older novel, so I don't know if she'll be tempted to go back to this world, but I think that the world leaves you wanting more, but satisfied with what you got. Overall, as I said, really enjoyed this one. I freaking loved Kat and seeing his adventures with Sagai and seeing him interact with all the different characters. I definitely recommend this one if you're into post-apocalyptic fantasy. I gave this one 4 stars. So that's my review on City of Bones by Martha Wells. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below if you've read this book before. Have you read anything else by Martha Wells? I highly recommend the Books of Rexura series and All Systems Red. If you are interested in picking this one up, let me know that as well. Anything else you want me to know, leave it down below and I will talk to you guys next time.